Let's set this all up. Can you put it on the
stand
lectern for me? I'm going to stand on the lectern to start.
There's some technical changes that happen here with wires and switches
So
and
fine,
things,
if you don't
which
mind.
can
No,
intrigue
sure.
you if you want to look
I've got
at
a
that, and
pocket.
I'll stand over
Put it
here
in
and
the
you can
pocket,
look
yeah.
at me instead if you don't
If you're
want to
happy
see
with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Catherine's
Is that okay?
slides are appearing. There we go.
Come on, get in there.
And meanwhile, I'll introduce Catherine.
It's always dodgy with...
Many of us have
Is that
heard and seen Catherine's presentations before, and they're always welcome and informative. As an introduction to Catherine herself, though, we should note that she's the Executive Director of the TAFE Strategy and Finance Unit.
Yeah,
And
microphone?
in this role
Oh, you go. Okay.
is responsible for planning, for resourcing, for performance, for accountability, and for policy in TAFE New South Wales. In her background, she's had a long career in adult education and training. Her previous roles include a range of policy positions in TAFE New South Wales, and also work on policy and curriculum and staff development for New South Wales AMES. And that's where she started her career, as a teacher of English to adult migrants with the New South Wales AMES.
Thank you.
Do
Yep.
you want to hold it?
No, I don't. Okay, now.
Bend well.
Oh, good. Can you all hear me fine if I put it there? Great. I asked Stuart to mention AMES because I think it's very timely. Basically, TAFE's facing two choices. I think Peter's absolutely right in what he's saying, and we can take a lesson from AMES. I loved AMES, but it failed to change. It didn't rise to the challenge that the Commonwealth Government threw to AMES. Personal view, by the way, not shared by everybody. But as a consequence, basically it doesn't exist anymore. So I don't see that future for TAFE, but looking at what happened in Victoria, this is the time you make the choice. The Victorian TAFEs, some of them made one choice and some made another. Some Victorian TAFEs decided to resist the changes that were coming. They put out this message that it was all over, it was doomed, we'd never survive. They're in deep trouble now. Some of the TAFEs said, no, it's just a new market, it's market reform, we have to rise to the challenge. And some of them are actually still going gangbusters. So I totally agree with what Peter was saying, but I think we have a choice, and particularly as leaders, you have the choice with your staff of putting out a really positive message that yes, TAFE will still be here, yes, SWSi will still be here, but gee, we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that that happens. But I am starting to hear some of those messages. Yes, all across the state we've had to close down some courses. That doesn't mean that TAFE's gone. TAFE's been doing that forever. I mean, I think it's a while since anyone taught typing as the secretarial skills. PABX, I haven't seen many of those for a while. If you think about the history of TAFE, when some of those lovely photos that are in the TAFE History Project, you look at classrooms that don't exist anymore, trades that don't exist anymore. Think about the change in our lifetime of the automotive trade and how different that is from what it used to look like. It's just another change, but it's a big one. I do want to say a couple of things now to start formally. I do want to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Darug people. I want to pay my respects to elders past and present and to Aboriginal people here today. I'm really pleased to be here. I like talking about this stuff in a way, but I do also want to say, smart and skilled, it's not mine. So I'm not here to advocate for it, but I am here to talk to you about it, and I'll answer as many questions as I can. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then the rest of my time I'll open to questions, and we'll see how we go along with that. I do need to say today's talk is commercial in confidence. Peter will make a decision at the end of the day how much of it's released, how many of the slides go out, because I want to be really frank with you about the position of TAFE financially as well as in its non-financial performance, and also about your institute in that regard. So this is for you, and then Peter will decide how much of this goes how far. And maybe it can all go, but that's your call, Peter. Peter mentioned the statement of owner expectations. It's up on the web. If you haven't read it, you really should. And can I say, your staff, especially someone who says there's not going to be a TAFE anymore, you say, go read this document. Because frankly, it's unique in Australia. It's the only, I'd say it's a kind of covenant between the government and TAFE. It has a definite role for TAFE that's distinct from all the other providers and puts TAFE at the centre of training in the state. That hasn't happened in the other reform states. And I think that's really important. It's not hard to find, so do go and have a look. One of the big changes for TAFE is that it's going to allow us to operate as a distinct financial entity, and having our finances separate from DEC finance is going to be, we're getting there, we're working on it at the moment, Barry O'Loughlin and his team. It's going to make a big difference because we're going to have that visibility. So I'm going to come back to the finance issues towards the end of the talk. Now, smart and skilled. So the kick-off, I'm just going to whiz through this really quickly because I want you to see where we're up to and what we've got to come next. So here's the timeline, and one of the things I do want you to notice is that a lot of the timelines around the consultation were pretty compressed. So they open 1 month, close the next. I won't spend too much time on 2013, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, and if there's any questions afterwards we can come back to those at the end. So I'm going to take us up to, there's the income contingent loan information. I've been asking when we'll know more about the loans for diplomas and when they can start. It's a really important issue for us because if we're enrolling students during 2013 for 2014 and yet the entitlements don't kick off till 2014, will we be allowed to offer loans to those students before entitlements kick off? So we've raised that with State Training Services. They're going to try and get the Commonwealth to commit to loans being offered up front for the 2014 courses. Now, IPART's published its report. Again, you guys should all be familiar with that, and if you aren't, please go and have a look at it. It's a really important document. Excuse me. Quality Framework's just been released, and we've done some work on that, and we'll be sending out a bit of information about that soon. The skills list came out. It's enormous. We were really surprised at how many courses were on the skills list. We've been told that they're going to have a revised skill list come out in a month or two to enable the tender process, because obviously you'll want to know what's on the skills list before you put in your tender. We're not quite sure how the tender process for TAFE's going to work, so I'm sorry I don't have very much information. We had Lynette come and talk to TPRC. I'm trying to see who in the room was at TPRC. Oh, Chen Liang, of course, you were on the video, weren't you? She wouldn't tell us very much, would she, about the That's right. So that gives us a bit of an idea about the process for the contracts. So that's when the it's going to go out. Now, this is the biggie really. In order for you to decide what you're going to deliver, you actually need to know what the fees and prices are. I just want to check everybody understands that under the new regime, each student is basically coming with a qualification price. The qualification price will be made of two components, the student's fee and the government subsidy. The amount that the student pays, the percent, will vary a lot depending on the student's eligibility and who the student is. So for an Aboriginal person, we've been told the student will continue to pay nothing, so the government will fully pay the full price. For someone who is not entitled to a place, they'll pay the full price, and there's going to be a lot in between. We've been told they're working on an algorithm to allow people to calculate online how much the student needs to pay, but we haven't seen it yet. And there's the fee calculator. That's when we think the applications are going to open. Contracts will come out, and finally the commencement. You'll all know that there was a delay of 6 months. I'm just so relieved, frankly, because of the systems. I think TAFE could have gone as an organisation in July this year, no problem, we're ready to go. But our systems weren't ready to go. And with some of the delays that you've been hearing about through LMBR, I think to have that extra time for both us and for State Training Services was really useful. It also gives us another 6 months to gear up, but sadly it also gives our competitors another 6 months to gear up, so we can't let our pace of change and reform slow down unless we get left behind. I imagine that you know this already. As I said, I was really surprised at the number of qualifications on the skills list, and I was a bit disappointed to see the number of qualifications that were being offered by us commercially going back onto the skills list, because frankly I think that's cost shifting from the private purse to the government in a very tight budget environment. I'm not allowed to use the word nutty because that would be unprofessional, but it is actually, it's nutty. We have been told they're going to seek some extra feedback on the skills list, and one of the things that we're going to particularly push for is this issue around commercial qualifications being on the skills list. But they talk to industry more than providers. Excuse me, I'll just get a sip of water. That's right. This is mine here. It's all right. This is mine here. Okay, I want to talk a bit about the quality framework today. Oh, thanks, Stuart. One of the things that the quality framework is doing is raising the bar. It's going to be actually above ASQA. So if you think of ASQA audit being your baseline for any provider, we've been told, a provider who's going to be involved in this process, the Smart and Skilled process, has to have ASQA and more. So you guys need to make sure that you're ASQA compliant, but that's actually not enough. There's going to be a lot of pressure about information, complaints handling processes, and students can go to State Training Services for info, but also make complaints to State Training Services. Now, I would like to say to you, no TAFE student should ever go to State Training Services for information. We want students to come to TAFE for information, because that's your customers. So you want to be presenting to your customers the information that you want them to hear. It's part of our market edge that we're so well recognised. TAFE New South Wales should be seen as the place that people go for reliable, helpful information in a system that's going to be pretty complicated to navigate. As for complaints, one of the things I think you should draw a line in the sand today and say no complaint about my institute will ever reach TAFE to State Training Services. Now, I know some of our students are unwell, and those complaints of course will reach State Training Services because, well, I used to work in a job where I handled all the complaints and frankly they'd been to everybody. Those complaints will continue to go to everybody. But a normal complaint from a student should never reach State Training Services. You guys should be handling it at your level and below so that they think we're fantastic, because there'll be a next round, won't there? And you want to make sure we're in prime position for the next round. A little bit about RTO eligibility. Couple of key points here. One is that the organisations must be based in New South Wales. That's something Pam Christie worked incredibly hard to achieve, because you have to be based in Victoria to run, and she said, why would we allow providers from Victoria to move into New South Wales to offer? And she fought and fought and fought, I have to say, and she won. So training providers must be based here. So now all that means is you have to deal with ginormous international providers like Vocation and Navitas, but at least you don't have to fight with the Victorian TAFEs for your business. So, you know, it's a start. The other thing I wanted to draw to your attention is the validation of assessment. It's a bit of a complicated issue. I think for an institute, I think it's important that you think about using the network of TAFE New South Wales for your validation, because what you don't want to happen is for you to be pushed into a place where you're expected to do validation with our competitors. I've actually had a job in the past in AMES where that happened, and frankly they learnt really well from us. You don't want to do that to yourselves. So work with industry partners and work with other institutes and across campuses at all levels, but let's keep it in the family so we learn from one another rather than helping the opposition. A little bit about IPART and how IPART works. For those that don't know, IPART is basically involved in using economic modelling to determine how fees and prices for a whole range of things like train fares and gas prices and things like that. I asked them what happens to a report that you give to government, and they say, well, three things can happen. One is they say thanks very much and put it in the drawer. One is thanks very much, we're going to implement everything you've said, and one is something in between. I'm anticipating something in between, but we don't yet know what that is. If I was a betting woman, and I'm not really, the thing I think they might move on is apprentice fees, because first year apprentices are so poor. But I'm telling you, this is me talking, this is nothing I've heard, it's just something that I have a gut feeling about. It's also a bit hot, a bit contentious, why would you have that fight? But I do expect to see many of the recommendations in the final report that's released by government, or it might just be a government statement, and things like the student making a much bigger contribution to the price of training, I'm absolutely certain will be there. I'm just not sure how much. I absolutely expect to see price by qualification, not price by semester or year. And I'm expecting to see loadings, but I don't know if they're going to be enough. I want to talk now about our financial and non-financial performance in the organisation as we prepare for Smart and Skilled. So I'm going to start talking about TAFE New South Wales first. These are the 2009 to 2013 figures comparison. And I think this is a really, really good slide for TAFE, because we know that under Smart and Skilled, from everything we've been told, there'll be less money in non-AQF. And that's a significant decline from 39.6 down to 28.1. So that's a great result for the organisation. You can also see that we've been increasing our higher level qualifications, which I think is one of the places that we are in the market. And in the Certificate 3 place, we've done quite well. Diplomas and Cert 4, pretty good. I think given all the changes that are happening in industry and our commitment to local communities and our commitment to meeting government targets, both state and federal, I think that's a pretty good result. So let's talk about SWSi. I think that's a good result for SWSi. It's not quite as good as I'd like to see, but one of the things that I wanted to point out to you today is that you've done a lot of work in the Cert 2 and 3 area to increase there, and you've dramatically dropped your non-AQF qualification. So you should feel really pleased about that, because in terms of a profile, what a profile for Smart and Skilled might look like, it's going to look a lot more like the 2013 one than the 2009. So I think in terms of your market positioning, you're really on the right track there. Your Certs 2 and 3 have increased by 8.3 percentage points in that time. But as Peter mentioned, your enrolments for this year to date are still down, and those are your customers for next year if they're continuing students. You have to go and grab them, folks. I don't know, go out in the street, get them, come in, I don't care. An institute as big as this really makes an impact on the whole of the organisation. You have a really important place in our organisation. But for your demographic and your industries, I think that focus on the Cert 2 and 3 is really clever, and I think it's the way to be going. And as I said, I'm really pleased about the non-AQF qualifications. Most of you will know I'm a pain in the neck about completions. For TAFE New South Wales, I think one of the most telling things in recent years was that NCVER study asking people to talk about what their intentions were. Because we've always said they didn't intend to complete, that's why they left. Well, that's not what they told NCVER. I was actually staggered at the percentage. It was up in the 90s of people who said that when they started their training, they intended to complete a whole qualification. And I have to say, it blew our myth about our students out of the water. So that's a really big challenge for us, and we're getting there. Thing is though, 2 years ago, Pam was able to stand up and say our completion rate's around 41% and it's the best in the country, and it was. And we were streets ahead of everybody else. And in the intervening time, we've gone backwards and our competitors are catching up, and I'm sorry, but it's not good enough. We really need to look at this. And I'd like to remind you now, everything we hear, it looks like the government's going to pay on completions. Now, when we had the PPPs, we had completions in 60%, and that's way above what we're doing now. Now, I know that there were a particular cohort of students in particular kinds of courses, but everything that you all learned from that process and from the completions projects, and this institute did more on completions than any other in the state, it's investment in your students. Yeah.
Maybe it's just me, but I can't understand the percentage of that's. Just say the non-AQF qualifications 46.7% of the total amount of completions. Is that right? Not the.
Yeah. But we've also got the 7.8% increase in AQF Cert 3 and above completions.
Okay. So
okay.
Completions as a whole.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
This isn't the completion rate. This is completions as a whole and where they've completed.
So about 20% of the total number.
Now, if you don't mind, Thor, can I throw to you and can you tell people what you were doing last year when you were working with us on that completions calculator? Do you mind if I ask you to step up for just a minute and tell people? Thor did some really clever work with us last year. And I waved at Thor, but he didn't know I was going to do this to him. Do you mind if Thor just takes a minute? Because it's a fantastic tool. You know your completions cohort tool that you worked on last year?
Yeah.
Tell people for 2 minutes about that.
Yeah. What we were working on, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, what we were working on last year was in the new Power Cube, you have the ability to actually look at the first year of enrolment for students and then track them through in subsequent years. And we're actually doing that. You could actually see where we're hemorrhaging the students, where they're not actually continuing through. And you can actually track that for individual colleges, right down to look at where we're actually losing our biggest impact, depending on the funding source. And that's where we found with the actual PPP programs, we were getting much higher completions out of those programs than we were out of any of the other programs that we're offering. And so it's really interesting. It's the first time we've really been able to truly calculate what our actual course completions were based on a course. You do get some anomalies coming in, like with the apprentices when they suddenly transition into a new course, and you say, oh, okay, we've got a cohort that all commenced in 2013 and we had 20% course complete in that year. But that was a ability to track through that we weren't getting the re-enrollments in the old qualification, and you could track it through. So it did require a bit of specific knowledge about the courses you were looking at, but it's the first time we've really been able to track that through.
Thank you, Phil. I thought I might as well go to the source, eh? Okay, so back to you guys. So you've done really well. That's a really good result, and it's in the higher level quals, and that's important because the higher level quals are harder to complete. They take longer to complete. It's a bigger investment, and I know that a lot of your apprenticeship cohort are actually coming to you. Oh, sorry, I forgot Thor was here. A lot of your apprenticeship cohort was actually coming to you with lower level skills at the outset, so you've had to invest in them in your pre-apprenticeship type programs. So I think that's, you know, good on you. That's a good result. I'm sorry, but it's not enough. So don't stop, keep going. And now the money. Okay, so this is TAFE New South Wales, and what we've been looking at, we've been doing quite a lot of work in this area because we're trying to remodel what the budget will look like in the new categories that will be under Smart and Skilled. This is the old categories that we're all accustomed to, and that's what I want to talk about today because it's familiar territory. We've got to a point where in TAFE New South Wales 30.6% of revenue, including student fees, which is going to change dramatically, is coming from sources other than what we used to call core. One of the things I'd like to say to you today is I'd like you to stop using the word core. It's not core, it's a government allocation, it's con-fund allocation, and it's just another source of funding these days. I think our staff, when they say core, they feel comfortable. It's like something in our heart. Well, guess what? It's not there anymore. I'm sorry. And we need to start talking about it. It's just another source of funding. Increasingly out onto the market, we'll be competing with it. So in town we're using, in my office we're trying to use words like con-fund allocation, government allocation, direct funding, but not core. And it's just about changing the language to change the messages. This is your challenge though, and I'm sure you know this already, it's no news. Firstly, I'd like to say I'm really pleased to put this up because of the way you've reversed the trend. That's good. That's really good because this wasn't going so well, was it? But last year you really, basically, you kicked people's backsides. I don't know how you did it, but that's a really big turnaround. And I'm hoping that, you know, in a year's time, next time I'm having this conversation, we're going to be seeing the trend still going right up. And of course we will because of the amount of money that's out there in Smart and Skilled. But even around these old categories, I think we can. You're nearly up to 20%. It's good. It's not enough, I'm sorry. You have to do more. And I know that's really easy for me to say because I'm going back to Bridge Street and, you know, we don't actually make much money in there. It's not our job to do that. Occasionally we get a project from the Commonwealth, but these days those have dried up. And at TPRC on Tuesday, Katrina J from Western described the budget situation in New South Wales as trying to wring out a dry towel. I thought that was really clever and funny. So this is great, but keep going and let's see that trend shoot straight back up again. I'm particularly pleased to see the increase in commercial starting to turn around and the contestable also. That's an important improvement because those contestable enrolments, that's where you're going to be competing. Those are the kinds of people you'll be looking for under Smart and Skilled. I want to talk quickly too a little bit about budget changes for TAFE. Currently we focus on cost management. It's not like a business at all. We have an expenditure budget from the Treasury. The Treasury basically forecasts how much they expect us to spend, not how much they expect us to bring in. And everything's based around expenses because they treat us like all the agencies that are entirely dependent on government funding. And naturally, we've done the same thing. But we need to turn that around, and hopefully we'll have the systems to do that soon. Wiping a tear from my eye. And we'll be able to talk about revenue, talk about our costs, talk about students and linking those to our revenue, building budgets on revenue projections and margins, just like any other business. And I don't think that's impossible, but gee, we could use a few systems coming out to do that. So hopefully that will be coming. We have some key financial risks we need to think about, and that's timeliness. We need to recognise our revenue and correctly account for it when we receive it. We don't do that terribly well yet. We're getting better, but I think there's still quite a long way to go, and we also need to manage our cash flows. One thing we have done, a huge improvement in our aged debtors over the last year, really knocked those down, and that's a great result. So we're looking at much more like a business in terms of looking for our debtors and getting those actioned as quickly as possible. A couple of years ago, the aged debtors were almost the bulk of our debtors, and they're not anymore. So that's everybody working on that right across our organisation. Now I'm just going to quickly finish up with what we've been working on in my area to try and support you guys, because you're actually at the cutting edge of all of this, and we sit in our offices and try and think of ways to help, and that's what we're all about. So I've been told not to say I'm from TAFE Strategy and Finance and we're here to help, because it sounds like Kevin Rudd in Russia, but we are actually, our job is to support you. You are our customers, and our focus is on supporting you, our customers, to support TAFE's customers, the students in industry and communities. I'm very excited about Let's Talk About TAFE. We went out to news poll, and that's not been done before, and that meant that journalists actually respected it. Rather than us hiring a consultant that we paid in a normal way, we took the risk, and Pam and Margie, our board chair, need to be really commended for taking the big risk of going to news poll to find out what people in the community really thought about. Well, news poll rang me up and said they love you. I went, yes, it was a very good day. One of the things that I thought was great was that 97% of people are aware of us. Basically, that's everybody. Of those people, 96% said our services are valuable, and that figure, much to my surprise, is very similar to the figure for business and industry. I thought we'd be in the 80s, but it's right up in the 90s, and it was across the state in every institute. The other thing that I was personally particularly pleased about, I pushed and pushed to have a question included about people's connection to TAFE. Because I knew, because everywhere you go, you know, I was sitting in a coffee shop on my way home, driving back from Byron Bay one year, and people at the next table were saying, oh, how's Johnny going? Oh, well, he's just started in his apprenticeship and he's off at TAFE and he's loving it. Everywhere you go, if you listen, you hear people talking about TAFE. And that's because 75% of them have some kind of personal connection. We also asked an open-ended question, which Newspoll doesn't usually do. We got only about 2 negative comments, and most people were saying things like, I went to TAFE, my children went to TAFE, and now my grandchildren are going to TAFE. TAFE's the place that people can change lives. They're not things you don't know, but gee, it was nice to have Newspoll tell us those things. However, we did other parts as well as Newspoll, and we went out to the community through the New South Wales Government website, and the board chair and other members of the board and institute directors and others went out and talked to constituent groups, and they do want us to improve. They don't just love us as we are. So it's nice to be loved as we are, but it's not okay to sit still, is kind of my message for today, really. Still more options. I don't think that means more courses. I think that means more flexible ways of offering, more customised services to students and industry. Whatever you think of, and when you are a customer yourself, that's what your students' expectations are. And on steroids, because Generation Y in particular seems to be particularly good at expressing their needs. Rapid response. No one's waiting for anything anymore. They want it right now. The biggest bugbear was how complicated it is to enrol, and that's a problem for us because I think it's going to be even more difficult under Smart and Skilled. That's why I said at the beginning that we want students coming to us for information. so that we can help them navigate. What we need to, it's going to be like the duck, you know. We're going to be doing all the paddling underwater, and for students it has to be really easy glide into our courses, into our enrolments. That's going to be a big challenge, and it's going to be particularly a challenge for frontline services staff trying to explain the fees have completely changed. The way you enrol, you're eligible, you're not eligible, all of that stuff. So there's going to have to be a big communication around this. I'll come back to that in just a sec. Peter mentioned red tape. And we're doing a lot to work with institutes to try and give more control to institutes to help them service their local communities and industries better. But at the same time, as Peter said, we've got to maintain our quality. Might as well not be here, I think, if we don't do that. In the Statement of Owner Expectations, we're supposed to set the quality benchmark for training in this state. I totally agree with what Peter said. If we can't afford to do that, might as well shut the shop. A couple of quick tools that we've done to try and help with modelling. This still has the not very helpful name it's called Figure 9 at the moment. Well, it's in beta. Last night it was put up on the Institute Planning Managers SharePoint site. We're asking the planning managers to test it. It's part of the reason it's in beta is we still have some unanswered questions about what's in community service obligation and what's in the way the OBF will work. So that's basically what this does, though. It breaks up our courses into areas that we know are going to be government funded, areas that we know are not going to be government funded, and then areas where we're still not sure. But it gives you an indication for each institute about where we think the market's going to be. At the moment, you can slice, well, if it's working properly, it is a beta, you can slice and dice it by campus and other RAM and things like that. So those who've got access to the Planning Manager's SharePoint, Jen Liang and others, please play with it and let Josh know. Josh is the engineer behind this, anything that we can do to fix it up and make it better. Once we've got the final skills list and a bit more info about CSOs, we'll put it out more widely for head teachers and everybody to use. I think most people have seen the price calculator by now. Yep. Nice few nods, but not everybody. This is available to anybody who wants to play with it. It's based on the IPART prices, which are, as you know, draft, but it gives you a way of starting to model how many students do I need to run this program and make a profit, to run at cost? When do I start to lose money? At what point do I need to start combining my classes to get back into the black? So once we have the final IPART prices, we'll drop those in, but in the meantime, I'd encourage you to get your head teachers to start playing with this tool if they haven't already. It allows you to look at the qualification price, the revenue you're likely to receive, and the cost of delivery, some of which obviously are inputs that you need to do yourselves. I think it's a really good practice for head teachers to start thinking about this as more as a business approach. We quickly put together a new course mapping tool. It basically allows you to put in a course that's on the skill. Put in a course, see if it's on the skills list, and if it's not, what the nearest equivalent course on the skills list is. Couple of opportunities for you there. One is to say to a student, if you enrol in this, you're eligible for a government subsidised place. If you enrol in that, you're not. It's an opportunity for you to say, I'm not going to run that one anymore, I'm going to transition out of it and into this one. Or you might also want to provide students with dual qualifications so that they can enrol in one and pick up a couple of qualifications in a commercial way from the other. So that's another tool that's out there for you to use. Sorry, just a second. The other thing I did want to say to you is we're going to put out a Q&A, the latest Information that we have on Smart and Skilled, hopefully by tomorrow, the end of the week. I reckon it's going to be Monday now. It's got all the information that we've been able to gather on all the most frequently asked questions. But I've asked my staff to stop doing that now, because what we want to start working on is, okay, this is the policy decision, what does that mean for TAFE? State Training Services, and we put the email in the last VET Aware, have a communication portal where you can send in your questions. Please encourage your staff to do that. My feeling is that State Training Services are not aware of how many questions there are out there. Because we've been fielding the questions, I think they don't know that we're getting questions from everywhere, putting them together and sending out info. And we can't keep doing that, because we have to start saying things to institutes like, here are your two choices. We think this is the better choice. If you go that way, we think it's going to be problematic for you for these reasons. So we're moving from fact to interpretation of the facts. The other thing is, frankly, it's time State Training Services started pulling their weight in the communication area. We've been doing that for them, and I think it's time that we moved on to our more TAFE-focused job. And they're the owners of the program and the owners of the information, and we aren't. A couple of high notes. Yay, team. I mean, you've obviously set the benchmark for quality in the country. That's a great way to enter the smart and skilled market, isn't it? So, wonderful result. Fantastic work, everybody. I know that that's done by everybody in this room and everybody across the Institute. It's a huge achievement. I think the Trade Readiness Program is also an excellent piece of work and should be commended, and it's now being taken up by other institutes. All the things that I've heard about from this institute about helping students prepare for study, fantastic. Get them in the right program, give them the right support, and that is what leads to completions more than anything else. It also comes down to having great teachers. And I know that's an area that this institute particularly has been focusing on through a range of professional development. I think a high proportion of your students are going to be eligible. You have a lot of young students in this institute. The 15 to 24 cohort you've maintained for years. You've got lots of apprenticeship commencements, the highest in TAFE New South Wales. You've increased your business in a lot of really important areas, as I was talking about before. And frankly, I think you're in a great position if you can just pick up on that non-government revenue. That's your Achilles heel at the moment. Everything else, I think, is really heading in the right direction. So I'll stop there. Oh, good. And open for questions.
Brian Mulvey, college member at
Tell you what we'll do.
I've got four questions.
4 questions. Oh, crikey. All right. Let me get my pen.
No, they're fairly simple. One of the problems we have during enrolments is the liaison between the apprenticeship centres and our organisation. We often get names transposed between our enrolment forms and the State Training Services, who are normally the apprenticeship centres. Why can't we be an apprenticeship centre in our own right? I seem to have read somewhere that Victoria TAFE is. First question. A couple of that. Why cannot our organisation be a group trainer? That's the second. The third is that I find it difficult when our fellow educators in the state, in other words the state school system, are also RTOs, teaching very much the same type of thing that we teach. Extended from that is, of course, the amount of money that's been expended in putting workshops into schools, which could have been better spent in TAFE. And the fourth question, which you probably won't be able to answer, is will the state election in 2015 have any impact on the smart skill?
Okay. They're all great questions, and actually the last question is the easiest. No. I reckon it's going ahead. The Minister said it's going ahead. He says it's kicking off on the 1st of January. He's been actually asked that question. Is it possible that it won't actually launch in 2015? And he said, no, it's going ahead. Now, so if there's a delay, what will happen? First thing, I don't think there will be a delay. I'll put that right out there. I think it's going ahead. I think they've done the phased implementation for these 6 months to make sure everything's ready so it works, to minimise complaints and problems. So actually that's about, if you like, your question about the electoral cycle. If it were delayed, well, it'll start right after the election, so that would just give us another couple of months to prepare a bit more. Don't think this isn't going to happen, and don't let anyone tell you it isn't. And as I said right early in my talk, the institutes in Victoria that fought back and said we're not going to do this, it's a disaster, we're going on strike, blah, 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 And that was right from the management level down. So it wasn't just the teaching staff and the unions, it was everybody. Those are the ones that almost don't exist. They're the ones that have had to combine. Your best approach is to go out there and make sure vocation doesn't steal your market. Make sure Navitas, by the way, Navitas is now the organisation that wiped out AMS, so please go get them from me. Don't let your competitors take your business. And let's just think about what's in Smart and Skilled. It's about allowing students and industry to make choices. Who will they choose? They need to choose us. That's your job. It's about focusing on students being eligible for subsidised training places and getting qualifications. That's our business, so let's go do it. The other three questions, I don't know, Peter, if you want to answer them. The state schools RTOs, it's government policy.
Can I answer that? Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? They feed us apprentices. Why wouldn't we have RTOs in schools? Why not? TAFE can't deliver everywhere. Schools are a pipeline to us. What we need to do is encourage more partnerships and relationships with schools. Now, if we ever think trade schools are going to disappear and all that, we're kidding ourselves. So there's going to be more competition. Embrace it, get on with it, forming partnerships. GTOs, why would we diversify a business? Group training organisations are very good at what they do. They should be in our colleges working with us. They should be sitting beside us. We should be their partners for training. And so we could be, Brian, maybe if we get more freed up, and maybe we need to think about it, but it had to be a very big case where I wanted to be an employer of 150 apprentices and place them and do all that sort of stuff. I reckon they're really good at that, but our preferred provider, we should be their preferred provider. Every day we should be ringing our partner in the group training organisations, every faculty. If the faculties aren't doing that, well, that's what they need to be doing. They need to be in bed with them. Did you know that My Gas group training organisation and My Gateway, two of our people that like us, have got 70 vacancies for apprenticeships. They can't fill them. Is there an opportunity for us to, really focus on that? And so my questions are like, do we want to add resources to going into businesses that we would struggle to compete in? But let's form them, have partners. And I'd love to see the money for trade schools go into TAFE, but I think the federal government's going to rethink trade schools at the moment. TVET or VETIS, whatever we need to do is a really, really big. What is it, up to 5 million for us now? Is it, Ken? 5 million. So we are heavily engaged in school. Let's make it 10.
Yep. Thank you. And can I just, I know Anthony's going to come and talk to you about facilities and utilisation rates and things like that today. If you've got an empty building, let's put an AC in there, let's put a GTO in there, and let's make Bankstown an apprenticeship hub and get those people to run their business out of your premises. Because I'll tell you what, if you don't, you're going to have other RTOs in here. So why don't you get partners into these premises and think about that as a different approach. Next question, please.
You've indicated that I've realised that the skills list the skills list that came out in 2014 is very wide, as you said. What's your view about what's going to come out in 2015? I'm Jeff Ladder from Community Services Faculty.
Okay, so this is where we get to the speculative part of my talk, which I'm really happy to do, but I just want to say I'm speculating now. This is not based on information, secretly held. We've reached, I think, in the Smart and Skilled implementation, the point of the known unknowns. Before it was the unknown unknowns, now we know what we don't know. That's an improvement, I guess. So I'm happy to speculate. I think it's going to be tightened up a bit, but not a lot. It's, as I said, the really broad skills list that we saw last year took me by surprise. I was thinking we'd see something really tight. What I actually think we're going to see is the tightening being done by the caps on RTOs and allowing the RTOs to make the decisions about what they run. Now, why would you do that? Two reasons. Firstly, that's where the customers are, so you're actually allowing the RTOs to make business choices. Secondly, you let the RTOs take the heat. Why aren't you running this program? Well, you can't say because it's not on the skills list. You have to say we made a business decision not to run it. So my guess is, as I said, I didn't forecast this, but my guess is that that's going to be what we'll see. But I am going to try and push back a bit on the courses that we're currently running commercially, because I just think it's silly.
What about quotas within that question? How they might limit it with quotas?
We understand that what they're going to do is put caps on RTOs, but at the TPRC on Tuesday, Lynette said we think it's just going to be a qualification cap. So, you know, you'll get how many qualifications, how many thousand quals, over to you to decide what you run within that. But, I mean, you remember my slide about where we're up to in that chart about how far along? There's still a lot of information that we don't have. And I think quite soon, when we finally get to see what's in the tender process in a couple of months, all that stuff will be clear. But it's still a little way to go.
Which one are you getting?
This one then, Paul.
Pam, my name's Valerie Bahadra, I'm the College Manager at Granville. You talked about the percentage of funding that we might get that's going to cover our overheads, our infrastructure, that type of thing, and you did make a comment that you didn't think it would be enough.
I didn't say that,
and I did
actually.
notice that, and I haven't seen it before, there is that calculator that about whether a course is viable, etc., and the costs that go into that. There are a lot of hidden costs that we run with in terms of not just customer service staff, administration, library, and I know that as an institute we're starting to look at that. There's also a lot of utilities costs, building costs, maintenance, all of that type of upkeep that needs to be done, and that actually goes towards making our places look nicer as well, because when they start to get run down they look quite shabby and very uninviting. You're talking about a very competitive environment. So I guess I'm just asking for some comments about how you kind of see that fitting into it, because I guess the other thing that I'd say is, even though I'm hearing that initially the government is going to support things, knowing how governments go, what they do in the first year may not be what they do in the second and the third, and then if another government gets in, we will see changes. So,
Okay. I don't think I was quite clear then in the point that I was making, because there are two different things, the operational base funding and also the loading. And when I was talking about the loading, I said I didn't know if it would be enough. And that's just because I don't know. Now, operational base funding, all the things that you've just described are not in operational base funding, because operational base funding is only funding for things that TAFE has to bear that no other RTO has to bear. So everybody has to pay utilities costs. Everybody has to keep their buildings looking nice. Everybody has to employ customer service staff, etc., 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 etc. Our OBF is basically based on the fact that historically our teacher costs are higher than, and they're certainly higher than the national, so what's called the national award. Award? Yes. And it's also on heritage buildings. We argued really hard, and I'm sorry we lost. Pam Young, I don't know, she nearly went to the wall on this one. She worked so hard to try and get them to understand that we have this huge footprint across the state of 130 buildings, and that was part of our legacy that we need to take into account in operational base funding. And I'm sorry, we just didn't win that one. But we did win some things, and we did win the operational base funding argument generally. So maybe you should make this a heritage 1970s building. After all, didn't you say, Peter, it's just like it was when you first were here as an apprentice?
A lot of it is.
Yeah, okay. So that sounds like 1970s.
Oh, it has improved, but
I know it's improved, but maybe it's a heritage building?
if you get a Chilora, it's also
Yeah. Don't just leave it. Paul was next, actually.
That's right.
I think the issue, Valerie, is that you're spot on. We have to include all those maintenance, operational costs, utility costs, all in our price.
Yep.
And that means that if it's 50% of our overhead, that's 50% less for teaching.
Yep.
We make it 40%, that's 60% for teaching, we make it 30%. So somewhere the total pool of funds is all in the price that we get plus the fee that we get. That's the scary bit when you look at the...
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right, Peter. Yeah, Paul, hello.
Hi, Catherine. Paul Perkins, Manager Student Operations. I may have missed it. You talked a little bit about bringing loans for that transition between 2014 and 2015. Do we have a clarity around what pro rata is on fees?
Not yet.
No, we don't.
Not yet.
It was easy. Anyone else?
Sorry. Sorry, Paul. No, I don't. No, I don't know.
Hello, Kath.
Hello.
I just wanted to ask, can you speculate on community service obligation funding?
This is actually the thing that's driving me batty at the moment. I wish I had more information to tell you. I'll tell you what I think, again, speculating on community service obligation. There's two bits to it. There's the loading that comes with any student. So where you're, let's use students with significant disabilities that require support will come with a loading, for example. As you'd anticipate, that's basically what happens in TAFE today. Where those students go, the loading goes with them. That's the first thing. Community service obligation in the IPART report is very complicated because IPART wants to use economic rationalism to allow the market to fail in order to test the market, and then if the market fails, then they're prepared to put in extra money and restart. Now, again, it's unprofessional of me to say nutty. It's nutty because if you don't mind, I'll use Western because it's a really clear example. Western shuts Menindee Lake because they decide it's not a viable market. They're going to test the market. It turns out to be not viable. The teachers will be gone. The building will be shut. Kate will have readjusted her profile to start delivering what used to be at Menindee Lakes in the nearest centre, which is Broken Hill, which isn't very close, by the way. I'm using an extreme example, of course. In your institute, it may be dealing with people with particular needs in the access and general education area, and there may be a community service obligation there. But I believe testing a market to the point of failure and then trying to restart a market I don't think it'll work. But again, that's an argument that we had with IPART, and I don't know what's going to come out of the final report, but in terms of the draft, I was very disappointed to see it was still there, because we did actually have that conversation with them. They listened, by the way, they really did. They were very respectful. Unlike many of the consultants that we've been dealing with over the last couple of years, the people from IPART were very professional and very respectful. Unfortunately, they didn't agree with everything we said, though.
We wrote a very detailed submission on this.
Any others? I'm going to start running by that clock. You've got 3 minutes.
Come on, someone must be thinking of something really hard.
Just in terms of that, Catherine, then, when I'm trying to get in my head, okay, so we started March. I saw the timeline about when things get implemented. In terms of systems, we're looking at some hopefully coming in somewhere this year, the end of the year. The Smart and Skill is going to be a lot of processing, a lot of administration is going to go along with this. Just said in terms of the claiming and looking at where people's entitlements are, etc., etc. When we are likely to start seeing some of that roll into the institutes, to the colleges?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you want, which bit you want to see.
Well, in terms of the systems, when are we going to start getting those systems?
I'm sorry, it's not my...
So we don't know that?
Well, this is one where I'm pleased to say I'm really sorry, it's just not my job and I can't answer your question. For all the things I do have to live with, I don't have to live with the systems issues. So I'm actually waiting for the delivery of the systems that we need to help you with the reporting particularly. So I'm a customer of that process and not a driver of it. Though we do jump up and down a lot. So I'm sorry I don't know the answer. You might. Do you know more?
Well, my advice is that they won't be in place. Even SAM and EBS4, if it was implemented now, would be useful. But I don't think it's going to be linked at all any semblance to state training services this year. But that's my gut feeling. That's my gut feeling. I might be wrong. They might be able to deliver this stuff.
Yeah, I might say I have said in terms of our reporting, I'm prepared to take it around the corridor in a wheelbarrow if required, on paper, anything. So if we have to print it out on pieces of paper and put it in a wheelbarrow, I'll wheel it around myself, but it's going to get there somehow. But in terms of the delivery of the systems to do that properly, I don't know the answer.
You want Sheila or not?
Yeah, go on.
Last one from Sheila.
Thank you. Sheila Kennedy, from Charles Faculty. I know there's some data analysis done on the completions, but there seems to be a lack of data on what happens to people when they're non-complete, in terms of that they sometimes, Cert 2s go into the workplace, the employer takes them on as an apprentice at a Cert 3 level. I'm just wondering if there'll be some improvements in that data, and if that will be helpful to us to increase the payments for progression students.
Okay. That's a fantastic question, actually. We've been asking NCVER you know the graduate satisfaction survey that comes out and we've got 90%. Wonderful, except they're graduates. Of course they're happy, you know. I've been asking NCVR for 4 years to start doing some national tracking of all the students, not just the ones who graduate. But I think maybe it's too expensive, because I'm sure like us they've had budget cuts, but they've never done it. We tried to get something like this started in TAFE last year, but we just got overwhelmed by all of the things that we were doing with all the consultants coming through. I have, not this year thank goodness, been spending my life talking to consultants, as I know a lot of the IDs have been too. I'm afraid I'm going to have to throw that one back to the institutes to do. I think this is going to be, in my mind, and I'm not sure exactly the level, but maybe a key role for head teachers in the future. What happened to my students? Where did they go? Did they go in the job they wanted to go, or have they left because they needed some money? In which case, what can I do to help them? Can we follow the student with our training and help them complete the qualification they originally wanted? Should we be transferring them to something else because they've left us in order to get employment? In an area as economically depressed as this one, I think we need to think, and I know you do, I'm sorry if I sound like I'm telling you how to do your jobs, but we need to think outside the gate much more in terms of people who are leaving us and follow them. And the other thing, some of you I know have heard me say this before, when people drop out of school, they get into trouble. When people leave TAFE, we need to follow them, and we say, when you're ready, come back, your place will still be available for you. We welcome them back, we make them feel comfortable about returning to TAFE. We do all the work to work out where they're up to if their qualification has changed in the interim, and we need a welcome back strategy so that people aren't afraid to come back and they don't feel like truants, which in southwestern Sydney could potentially be an issue for some of our students, I think. Okay, thank you all very much. It was a really enjoyable talk for me and great questions. Don't give up, you know, you're doing really well. Thank you.